Richard Vobes, or Richard, should call you. He spoke about.
It's not my name.
It's not your name. No. Why did you say yes? But you said yes.
Yes, I know.
What I was going to say is Richard, not Vobes, but Richard, he spoke about consciousness, and I'm going to start with consciousness and end with consciousness, and we go on a little journey together about the lunacy that is going on in our society because we've allowed it to go on. And consciousness is not separate from our society. Everybody in here is thinking, and our society has been made up of thoughts. All the names that Richard mentions, all the taxes comes out of thinking. And so the consciousness creates the society. London, Liz mentioned about TfL, Transport for London. I mean, we're in Exeter, but I don't know whether you all know that there is London Transport, they used to be called. Now, to be trendy, they call it Transport for London. It's still London Transport. Basically, they run the transport system in London. And they've been served with a pre-action protocol on Wednesday, Sadiq Khan and TfL conjointly, because they put up very, very dangerous technology in London. Whether they know they've done it, I don't know. But they have put this equipment up, and it's extremely dangerous. So I want to go through how they put it up, and then I'll go into why it's so dangerous. You probably heard of Klaus Schwab, lovely man. He created the fourth industrial revolution, and
Sorry.
yes.
It's left and right.
Oh, right,
To
yes.
the next slide.
Right.
Or you can just look at me if you want.
Yeah. Right. And basically, the fourth industrial revolution is a transhumanistic agenda. They want to change you and your consciousness, change your DNA, change your consciousness. And they involve fifth generation warfare. And 5G is the basis for all of it. And we'll go through all of that, and then you'll see why the Transport for London and Sadiq Khan should be in court. In prison, yeah. What I was going to say, you know the government is round the bend. I think it's pretty clear, isn't it? And they come up with all sorts of crazy things to put people in prison. But I'm a local councillor, and I became a local councillor because I don't accept the society we live in. I stand for the old society in which people told the truth. They did things in public service, and they treated each other equally and with respect. And that's why I say I'm a local councillor myself. I strongly support the law and due process, and which is why I support the court action to remove the ULEX equipment legally. And I'll just read this in case somebody pops around and arrests me. Before we begin, please note this content is created in the public interest to encourage open dialogue, civic awareness, and educational understanding. It is not professional advice, nor is it affiliated with any official body. Viewers are encouraged to think critically and verify the information independently. Yes, that's different. Yeah, absolutely. That's when we get on to ULEZ, you see we make reference that they failed in court already. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Right, the UN agendas, which are gradually going down the drain, we hope, because Donald Trump has stopped the funding to the World Economic Forum, which is a very good step in the right direction. But this is what they wanted to do, control the food chain, and we've heard a lot about that today, pesticides and fertilizers to poison us, changing the structure of farming, which Liz is an expert on, and control in all areas of our life. Now, why do they need that control? Because technology has advanced, and people on the production lines are not needed as much as they were, so people can sit at home, sit on their internet and ask questions and find out, which is very dangerous for the ruling elite. And so they need to depopulate. And Francis Boyle and Mike Yeaton refer to this. There is fifth generation warfare going on. They control the media, as you know. The BBC is a classic example. And they control the food through bovia and mRNA injections we just heard all about. And they want to do transhumanism for everybody that is still alive if they haven't bumped you off. And this is total control over human consciousness. Now, there is something called the Deagle forecasts. The CIA, DoD, Rockefeller Foundation, confirmed as architects of Deagle, they forecast that the population of the UK should be 15 million by the end of this year, and America should have population reduced by 200 million, I think, by the end of this year. So hopefully they won't succeed, and their plans are not going to plan at the moment, which is encouraging. The place of vaccines, we heard from the veterinary gentleman a great deal about vaccines, mRNA vaccines. Vaccines and 5G are two sides of the same coin. And in relation to Dr. Yeaton, who was Vice President of Pfizer in the UK, we are all under assault by deranged people who have their own reasons for wanting totalitarian control over everyone and to kill off an expected majority of them. That's us. And Francis Boyle was an advisor, was an attorney, and he was an advisor to the American government. He said, "It is my expert opinion that COVID-19 nanoparticle injections or mRNA nanoparticle injections or COVID-19 injections meet the criteria of biological weapons and weapons of mass destruction." So that's where we are. And General Flynn, who is a very intelligent general, he is trying to educate people that we are in a war. I mean, somebody mentioned that the army has been depleted because they don't need soldiers in this war. It's a technological and a psychological warfare. Big one? Yes, absolutely, yeah. And he wrote this book to prepare Americans and freedom-loving people everywhere for our current global wartime reality that few understand. Here comes the Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare by Lieutenant General U.S. Army retired Michael T. Flynn. And I hope he gets a job in the Trump cabinet. I don't know whether he will or not, but I hope he does. NATO. Now, we all know about NATO. Cognitive warfare is a new domain of conflict that aims to change how people think by exploiting social media and smart devices. So that's part of fifth generation warfare. We know it's going on. Brigade 77. Have you all heard of Brigade 77? Yeah. No? Right. Military intelligence, MI6 is overseas, MI5, and military intelligence is domestic. Part of domestic military intelligence is Brigade 77, and we'll come on to what they do a bit later on, because you can see they're paid to lie. What does the World Economic Forum have in store for our human consciousness exactly? This is very, very helpful in trying to understand this fifth generation warfare. This is a quantum field. The shape of this lectern is given by an invisible Wi-Fi field, and out of that field is the expression of matter and time and space. And it's the same with a human being. You have a biological, natural, harmless quantum field, and in it are all your memories, your language, everything you think is in the quantum field, and it has all your biochemical reactions in there as well. And that is called a morphogenetic field for a reason. Genetic is DNA. The DNA is an antenna, picks out of the quantum field all your information. So if you want to control humanity, you control the energy in the field and you control the DNA. That's why the World Economic Forum wants to get at your DNA and hack into it. This is a summary of the World Economic Forum. Not by a conspiracy theorist, it's by Forbes magazine, which is a pretty mainstream organization. When the Internet of Things connects with your body, the result is the Internet of Bodies. The Internet of Bodies is an extension of the Internet of Things and basically connects the human body to a network through devices that are ingested, implanted, or connected to the body in some way. Once connected, data can be exchanged, and the body and device can be remotely monitored and controlled. That means they want to remotely monitor and control you. So that's the objective. Glad to say that Klaus Schwab has resigned. This is Star Trek level of science, and most people are not aware of the degree of sophistication involved. And here is a patent from 2018, before the pandemic, with regard to the present invention generally relates to injectable electronics. In some aspects, the present invention is generally directed to systems and methods for interfacing an electric cable with electric elements, such as nanoscale wires, that are injected or otherwise introduced into a subject. Now, Klaus Schwab is not going to invite you to pop round to your local NHS so that you can ask to be stuffed full of nano. How are they going to get them in you? Injections. Now, they've been using this nanotech since 2017 at least, and this was long before the pandemic, and these are electron microscopy pictures of nanotechnology, nanoparticles in regular flu vaccines, for example. This is Invarex and Prevnar, widely injected into people. Without their knowledge, they're getting injected with nanotech, without our knowledge. So you have two things going on. You have the neo-Malthusians who want to bump off a load of people, and you have the wish to control the remnant completely. And just quickly, how do we get a government or local government doing these terrible so-called cameras in London? You'll see how bad they are towards the end of this discussion. They do it through compartmentalization, false narratives, and fake news propaganda, which is why you've no idea what they're installing in London. It's not because anybody in this room is stupid, it's a very high level of intelligence here, but because they introduce compartmentalization, and maybe Sadiq Khan doesn't even know what he's installed, and false narratives like global warming, and fake news. So here are a few examples. This is my dear grandfather. I'm sure nobody's ever heard of him. He was a man called T.H. Frankel. He was a Jewish man living in Vienna at the time of Hitler. He came over to England. I am the product of a non-Jewish father who married his daughter. And this man came over to England and joined British military intelligence in the war effort against Hitler with his cousin, a man called Sir Louis Namier, who was an advisor to Churchill. Both those men died not knowing that Britain and America were financing Hitler. How many people in the VE celebrations knew that this country with America were financing Hitler and Churchill? It's astonishing, isn't it? I mean, I'm very sorry that my grandfather, who of course I loved, was so badly misled by the British government and by the Americans, of course. Not that I'm anti-British, I'm very pro-British. I think it's a wonderful country, and I think we can return to the values that we used to have. Sorry.
Very briefly on that.
Yes.
Big one. Is there a primary reference
Yes.
to draw out on the
Yes.
English and US?
Absolutely. Here it is.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And it's available for anybody to look. It's just people don't look because we're so... I mean, I thought Churchill was a wonderful guy. I had no idea that he was being financed by the same people that were financing Hitler. I mean, it's a shock to me. And my grandfather died not knowing, and he was doing his best, for the British war effort. All war is a scam. No question about it. It's a racket, yeah. This is an example of fake news. This is J.D. Vance, the Vice President of America, by the Wall Street Journal. Exclusive. Vance pledged to hit Russia with sanctions and potentially military action. What he actually said J.D. Vance made no explicit pledge to either sanctions or military actions. That's the news. What else have we got? Brigade 77 for the lady who is interested. From the BBC, the blessed BBC. Wonderful organisation. The army is setting up a new unit that will use psychological operations and social media to help fight wars in the information age. That is an example of fifth-generation warfare that we're in at the moment. And here, I don't think it was supposed to get onto the internet, but it was put out to the internet. This was a telegram conversation between a Brigade 77 agent and an innocent member of the public who asked this bloke why he talked porky pies. And he said, I've been working for Brigade 77 this whole time. It's our job. Anyway, I'm quitting now. They can't stop me from talking. He said, okay, admit it. I lied to you. You want to know why? Because he's been working for Brigade 77. So our taxpayer money has been used by the government to put out propaganda, which is a posh word for lies. And I don't accept it. I'm a local councillor. I don't like that myself. Right, and this is another thing which shocked me, because I used to think that Britain was the real cradle of democracy. I didn't really like The Guardian much, but I thought it was a wonderful organ for intelligent middle-class people to get the truth. Part of the great British Fourth Estate, until I read this from a man who used to work for the Financial Times. The minutes of the Ministry of Defence meetings have confirmed the role of Britain's Guardian newspaper as a mouthpiece for the intelligence agencies. Last week, independent journalist Matt Kennard revealed the paper's deputy editor, Paul Johnson, was personally thanked by the Defence and Security Media Advisory Notice, or D-Notice Committee, for integrating the Guardian into the operations of the security services. Yes, exactly. Yes, D-Notice. Yeah, so, I mean, it's not surprising that Mrs. Jones, 33 Acacia Avenue, who reads The Guardian, watches the BBC and Sky, hasn't got a clue what's going on in London. False narratives, everybody loves this one, the net zero scam, as Donald Trump calls it. He calls it the Green New Scam, and I think he should have a word with Keir Starmer and, what's his name? Ed Miliband. Sorry, that was a mistake. Miliband, yeah. Antarctica gains ice for the first time in decades, reversing the trend of mass loss, study finds. And this is, there we are, like the 5G narrative saying 5G is safe and effective as the vaccines, by the way, it's just a load of old cobblers. But there is reliance, for example, in 5G, the government will say it's safe because of ICNIR, the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection. But that's a heating metric in concern with how you heat up when you're in a 5G field, a microwave field in general, yeah, which is smart meters, phones, and yes, or even less. You see, the 5G we've got is not millimeter, it's lower than millimeter, longer wavelength, still 5G. We'll come on to that later. But we know that oxidative stress, which is a known precursor to cancer, occurs levels well below the government's heating metric, and they're non-thermal, non-heating effects, nothing to do with heat. It's like when you go for an X-ray, you won't heat up, but if you stay there too long, you'll be dead. Other crazy narratives, no meat by 2049. We had a marvellous speech by the lady about horses, and I don't eat any meat, but I'm all in favour of people, if they want to eat meat, but you weren't supposed to be eating it after 2049. Drugs to stop cows farting. I mean, how ludicrous is that? And no shipping by 2049. Encourage farmers not to grow food. Well, that's a brilliant idea, isn't it? ESG and DEI, well, that's another load of old cobblers, isn't it? I mean, it's inherent racism to decide you need a lot of so-called black people to balance up a job. I mean, that's absurd, isn't it? And C40 cities, and London is a C40 city. Mayor Khan is chairman of the C40 cities worldwide. All part of total control. Now, this is my favorite one about the net zero crisis. Unprecedented climate change has caused the sea level at Sydney Harbour to rise approximately 0.0 centimetres over the past 140 years. Yes. We should send that to Mr. Miliband, sorry. Yeah. So back to transhumanism, and we spoke about the DNA as an antenna in the morphogenetic field. And the level of science to control the energy in the field and your DNA is very advanced. And actually has been going on since the 60s. And I don't know whether you've heard of Barry Trower. He used to work for naval intelligence. One of his jobs was, or one of his colleagues' jobs was to sort of irradiate East German, this is before the Berlin Wall came down, East German spies with microwave radiation. And when they got back to East Germany, they couldn't remember a thing because it affected their morphogenetic field. So the government knows very, very well all this technology. I mentioned 5G as the basis for all of their control agenda. And why is that? Well, because it's called non-isotropic. In other words, if you throw a pebble into a pond, it goes out in rings and they're isotropic. 5G is not isotropic. It's the formation of beams of energy, signals collimated into beams of energy. And you can see how they do it. They phase the signal through an array of antennae, and then you produce these beams. And you need the beams to scan the field, pick up the emitting data, which means picking up your data. And they want to create a field of energy, so whatever you do, you'll be monitored and surveilled, as the World Economic Forum said. Exactly, everywhere. The top of the streetlights. Exactly, this is it. This is a streetlight. And inside this, which is supposed to be a photocell, you can see a 5G plate lens antenna. And here you see the detail of that antenna. That little slit collimates the beam. Okay? Now, people who live in a street of these things can be monitored. They can listen to you and they can see you walking around your house, because when you walk around in your house, you create a disturbance in the field. That disturbance can be digitized and backhauled by the scanning beam to a computer for analysis. And that's going on here. Keir Starmer didn't tell you that. BBC didn't tell you that.
Are you suggesting they're lying to us?
I'm sure they never lie. Absolutely. And the press are completely free to do whatever they want, which is lie. Absolutely. So to recap, this was the agenda. Once connected data can be exchanged and the body and device can be remotely monitored and controlled. Now, what happens if you inject a load of people with nanotechnology and let them walk around in a microwave field? That's how you can monitor them. And you can't have a Brigade 77 man sitting on the end of the telephone and listening to your conversations, because there are 7 billion of us. So they need to automate it through AI to scan the field, picking up all the information, backhauled to a computer for computer analysis and identification. That is what 5G is all about. And the parameters of 5G are beamforming to scan the field, scanning, backhaul, that's sending the data back to a computer, and to create a densified field so that if you imagine this all full of ping pong balls, that's a microwave field. So when you walk around in it, you dislodge the balls and you can create an image. That's really a metaphor for what happens if human beings walk around in a microwave field. They can scan you and then monitor you. And when you speak, it creates a disturbance in the field, which is also digitized and backhauled to a computer. So that's what they've created, through the smart meters, through the 5G towers, through the small cell network of the street lights, through the small cells that they're putting up on the street lights at lower levels. And it's called LoRaWAN. And I'm a local councillor, and I object to this because I don't think it's right to surveil and monitor and kill off humanity, surprisingly enough. And so I wrote the City of Southend, Southend-on-Sea City Council, his full name, told me that wooden poles, just ordinary wooden poles put up, are going to be used for LoRaWAN, which is this network, long-range, wide area network. They admit it. I mean, they probably don't know what it means. But I wrote back to them and said, I'm a local councillor, and to quote your words, LoRaWAN network facilitating the seamless connectivity of the Internet of Things in this area. And I said, is in fact the very implementation of the WEF surveillance and control agenda. LoRaWAN means long-range wireless area network. They use the word wide, but it is a wireless area network. I await your reply with very great interest as to whether you grasp the serious responsibility you face in evaluating this application. It was a planning application, and the many others which are similar. I got no reply. Just to show you that I'm not making all this up, this is 5G and wireless body area networks for measuring blood pressure, glucose sensors in the body, that implanted in the body through the vaccines, of course. And this, they can apportion MAC codes, media access codes, to identify you through this technology, and then those will emit a signal which can then be scanned and backhauled to a computer. And this paper relates to media access codes, energy harvesting schemes. So this is there for the finding. Yuval Noah Harari was Klaus Schwab's deputy. And he says, today we have the technology to hack humans on a massive scale when we've explained how they want to do it. And transhumanism is the change of your DNA. And you know the vet that we listened to talked about mRNA, which is to change your DNA. And the energy is changed through this wireless area microwave network. And the government knows all about this change in DNA. For example, maize histone H2B mGeri, a new fluorescent chromatin marker, transgene design, plant transformation. They've been doing it on plants as well as on animals to change the DNA. Remember H2 mGeri, because we're going to come back to that in relation to Transport for London. This US patent apparatus a method for remotely monitoring and altering brain waves. Absolutely. And this is a transhuman being. Nanonodes, hydrogel swimmers, nanosensors, nanocontrollers, nano-interface communication with the outside for monitoring and control. And this summarizes it, the gradual shift from the current form of human electronics, like your heartbeat is electrical, of course, coexistence to human electronics cooperation is the vision. In other words, they want to change your existing electronic system to a different transhuman system which they can monitor and control. And here's an example. That very interesting gentleman who is a vet explained about the transmission of the nano inside the body. This person has had 2 COVID vaccines and went for a 3rd booster. And you can see it distributes the nano throughout the body. And at the end of the lecture, I'll explain there are ways one can get rid of this nanotech. I didn't take any vaccines, but I do breathe, at the moment at least. And you know they're spraying this stuff into the air. And so I regularly detox, and I'll give you access if you're interested. I'm not recommending it in case they arrest me because I'm not a doctor, but somebody else recommends it, so I can point you to their recommendation. Transhuman and optogenetics. I mentioned H2 mGeri. They've been working on animals to make them sensitive to light, so that if you beam a light at an animal, change their DNA, you can change the animal's behavior. And that features in Transport for London, you'll see. An opsin is a light-sensitive chemical, so they can introduce light-sensitive chemicals, they can change your DNA to make it, through these light-sensitive chemicals, sensitive to light. And here is a schematic to show what they've been doing on animals. They beam the light source on the animal and record its changed behavior. And here is light-based approaches to cardiac arrhythmia research from basic science to translational applications. Making that in straightforward English, if you've got the right equipment, they can beam you and switch off your heart. That's what that's talking about. And the Transport for London equipment, stopped. Yes, I think it is switched off. Yes. They obviously don't want you to hear this. I'll speak louder. Can you all hear me? Yeah. Okay. And just to show you, the government knows all about it. This is the UK Health Security Agency that used to be called PHE, Public Health England. They changed the name to fool you, I think. I'm sure they've got another reason why they do these things. This is them talking about H2B M Cherry. That's the British UK Health Security Agency, so they know all about it. I think the battery's gone flat. Now, we come on to Transport for London, which is the whole purpose of this talk together. I mean, it's a conversation, really. This, by the way, if anybody goes on Substack, does anybody read Substack? Yes. There's a man called David A. Hughes who has taken it upon himself to say that I'm dishonest, and that AICS, which is the organisation I'm chairman of, Adult Child Health and Environmental Support, is dishonestly crowdfunding for these legal cases. I'll explain to you why he's wrong, and it was absolutely ridiculous for him to put that Substack out. Here, this is supposed to be a ULEZ camera. On the side, it has made Unex, manufacturer's name. On the top is number 2 radar, and number 1 is phased array radar. You know, we spoke about phasing the signal through an array that creates the beam wave. So it's part of 5G. That chap, David A. Hughes, said 5G is completely separate from this. It's not. This is 5G. You've got collimated signals, beam waves in the infrared range, light range, and in the microwave range. And the combination of that with optical technology is called fusion. And a Freedom of Information request was put through to Transport for London, and they denied any knowledge of radar, yet their cameras, so-called cameras, which are not cameras at all, have Unex, and this is Unex traffic. The Heimdall detector hardware is a radar device. And here is the phased array. You see, that's how you create the beam waves. These are little antennas for the radar device, and you phase the signal through it to create the radar scanning beams. And here, this is the so-called ULEZ camera. Thanks very much.
It is embarrassing.
And underneath here are laser diodes. Now, laser diodes form in the infrared light. So you've got radar in the microwave range, and you've got laser in the and this captain Hughes said that AMPR cameras will automatically take recognition there. Now, AMPR cameras work on digital. They don't work on laser diodes. And he sent me a picture of an internet search showing these laser diodes on the camera. Why do you need laser light to illuminate it? So it shows you that TFL having only the cover. And the next thing is, right, this chap they use on the Substack, if you get an independent Substack from him, he said you couldn't see any laser signals on the board. This is the circuit board for these lasers. Oh, it's working, has it? Thank you very much indeed. Hello? Yes, very good. These are the laser diodes. That's a laser warning. That's a laser warning. Now, you're supposed to put laser warnings so that people can see them, not locked away inside the equipment so people can't see them. But I sent this to David A. Hughes, and he said, where are the laser warnings? Yes. Incredible, isn't it? Right. So this technology is called mesoscopic. You can see the word there. Mesoscopic physics relates to nanotechnology and above. So you're talking about molecular and atomic level, which is mesoscopic, nano-sized surveillance. And near-infrared diffuse optical tomography, tomography is where they scan you for your blood pressure and the rest of it, one of the most sophisticated optical imaging techniques. And so it goes on in relation to tomography. So you've got infrared beams checking for heat to make sure you're still alive in your car. And if you are, it'll send a signal to the radar beams, which are extremely powerful, and they send a radar beam, possibly to switch you off. Now, that's if they operate at full power intensity. If they operate at normal intensity, you're going to get cataracts. By their very own scientific literature, I pressed the wrong button there, ICNIRP, which is the organization I've already mentioned, the government relies on, infrared cataract and temperature elevation within the eye. Tsutsumo Okuno wrote a paper to say concentrated near infrared light gives you cataracts. So if you go up to traffic light with this UNEX equipment and look into the camera for, say, 5 minutes until the lights change, you're going to get cataracts, according to the government's own literature. And you're going to be beamed with collimated radar beams and scanned, and the government knows causes of death among Belgian professional military radar operators, a 37-year retrospective cohort study, declares radar causes cancer. So you're going to get cancer and you're going to get cataracts. And that's the technology they put up in London. And I'm a local councillor, I uphold the law, and I think things should be done legally and professionally. And that's why I support this case, and why David Hughes is out of order to criticise AIX for supporting this cause. And just so you know that I'm not making it up, they talk about mesoscopic in their own literature, and they talk about the London Living Laboratory, where they're going to test fusion technology. Fusion is not atomic fusion, it's a mixture of radar, LiDAR, which is near infrared collimated signals, and optical light. Those three things combined is fusion technology, which they're testing out on innocent people in London now, all over London. And inside there, and why 5G is so salient to all of this, you'll see made in China. That's a Thales modem connecting all the data they've connected on you when you stand up at the traffic lights, sending it back to a computer, nobody quite knows where. But it's a Chinese modem. And MI6 have now come out and said China has too much control over the London transport system. Just yesterday or the day before. So maybe AIX can enlist MI6 to join our court case against Sadiq Khan and Transport for London. There we are, so that's that. They, in this equipment, apart from doing these terrible things to innocent people, they're breaking certain laws, and they've broken the Telecommunications Act, because you're not supposed to put a modem, telecommunications equipment, above 3 meters, and most of this equipment is above 3 meters. So that's one law they've broken. They've also broken the Laser Misuse of Vehicles Act, because you're not supposed to beam a laser beam at vehicles. So there we are, Laser Vehicles Misuse Act, Telecommunications Act, ICNIRP, their own guidance they're breaking, on the Okuno paper, they're not supposed to give people cataracts. The most astonishing thing in all this, ladies and gentlemen, is ICNIRP, this thing they rely on, says if you've got metal in your body, you're excluded from ICNIRP. You're not covered by the safety guidelines. These are metal nanoparticulates, so everybody technically who's had a vaccine is going to be excluded under their guidelines. This is the British government. Unbelievable, isn't it? Right, I mentioned mesoscopic. Now, this chap, David Hughes, doesn't understand the word mesoscopic, but we understand it. It means mesoscopic physics goes down to the nano size. That's molecular and atomic size and above. So it's nano size. Fusion has an advanced mesoscopic simulation methodology built into its algorithm to swiftly evaluate the impact of the adaptations considered within this optimization process. This is the UNEX literature. UNEX make the TFL so-called camera equipment. And more details on nanotechnology. And the government, there's a company called Oxford Nanopore, partners with the UK government to roll out LAMPOR, a new generation of COVID-19 tests based on nanotechnology. So there we are. What are we going to do? Oh yeah, what I was going to say, just to be even more astonishing, the telecom industry says that this radiation, from telecom towers and all of that, causes DNA damage as a precursor, can increase the cancer risk. And in genetics, chromosome translocation is a phenomenon that results in unusual rearrangement of chromosomes. Swisscom patent says radiation can cause damage to genetic material, in particular human white blood cells, etc. So the telecom industry knows, the government must be able to read English, yet they say everything is perfectly safe. And what's more, if you stand at a traffic light in London, you might not get a cataract on Tuesday, but if you walk your dog and stand there every week, the effect is cumulative, like going for a dentist. The dentist goes out of the room, because if he's in there every time you have an x-ray, he's going to get cancer. So the effect will be cumulative on the people in London. There we are. Right. This is the court case that AIX is supporting, and Mark Steele presented the documents, the pre-action protocols, to Sadiq Khan. I don't think he was in when he presented them, but he filmed it, so they can't deny they haven't received the documents. And just quickly, so you understand the process, even if David A. Hughes doesn't understand it, AIX promotes and enhances and protects human and environmental well-being. AIX has become aware of harmful fusion technology involving electromagnetic radiation has been installed by Transport for London. This technology has been used by TfL and the equipment supplier UNEX in the London Living Laboratory. Fusion technology is a combination of radar and LiDAR, as we said. In an FOIA reply, TfL denied any knowledge of fusion, yet it's in the UNEX literature. They are trying to say that the A and B cameras are different from the UNEX traffic monitoring, but the people who chopped down the ULEZ cameras, they didn't know anything about fusion or mesoscopic physics. But in those ULEZ cameras, which they chopped down, are the laser diodes and the radar devices. Yet the government is trying to say, or TfL is trying to say, or GLA is trying to say, we don't know anything about fusion. I mean, we live in a deceitful society, a deceitful consciousness. So that's what we're doing in supporting the case. And if you go on the AIX website, you can click and donate if you want to support the legal action. And as I say, I'm a legal counsellor, and I think things should be done openly and properly and legally. Just to mention about these chemtrails, the government now admit it, to stop the sun coming in so that their solar panels can work so efficiently. Graphene oxide nanoparticles for cloud seeding patent, and that's why I regularly detox, because you breathe all this stuff in. This is the paper recommended by Caroline Mansfield, who has spoken to our AIX events, and she got a peer-reviewed paper to analyze the effect of the thing that she recommends. And if you go onto the AIX website, AIX.international, and go under sites of interest under detox, click on there and you can go through to her website and you can see the product she recommends. Finally, I'm nearly on the last furlong, you'll be glad to know. Shakespeare, he said, there are many more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio. Now, modern physics is saying human thought is light, photonic activity going through the DNA. Look at a tiny weeny amount of spectrum in the visible light range. You've got all this, all that, and much more in the universe. that we're excluded from when our consciousness is totally dominated by thought. In other words, there are very intelligent philosophers like Socrates, Plato, Shakespeare himself probably, because he said, I'm bounded by, like a nutshell by my thoughts, or words to that effect. So we are at a point in human development whether humanity can transcend thought, and thought is a time-based process. So you can't go into eternity if your mind is dominated by thought. And we spoke about the morphogenetic field, and what is interesting is the sun is the source of all climate change. And we're probably going into a cold period, not in a heating up period, as everybody knows. And the sun is the source of our consciousness. And in the Old Testament, they understood this, because the last book of the Jewish Old Testament is the book of Malachi. And they said, the Son of Righteousness, S-U-N, not S-O-N. And when I was a child at a British Church of England primary school, and the vicar used to say, Jesus is going to be in you, I always wondered, how's this whacking great bloke going to get a 7-year-old bloke? But if we understand that it's a source of a different energy out of which a new consciousness comes, a new heaven and a new earth, from the sun, then it makes much more sense. And the Essene literature, before the Council of Nicaea in AD 325, refers to this change in human consciousness. And that's it.